Greetings, everyone, through here. Welcome to the Demo Hub. Welcome to another exciting episode. Today, we have two fascinating guests joining us for a demo and a discussion. David Giantilik is joining us today, co-founder of Delphi Labs. Michael Irving, also the co-founder of Delphi Labs, joining us today to talk about the product and the tool they're building. David, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
Yeah, really glad to have you both. Where are you calling from, David?
So I'm based near London in the UK.
Oh, nice. Oh, nice. And Michael, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is a small city outside of Philadelphia.
Oh, wow. So we've got a lot of time zones covered here. So really glad to have you both. So David, starting with you, for the folks that don't know about Delphi Labs, can you talk and unpack what it is you're doing and the product you're building for somebody who's not familiar with it?
Yeah, so Delphi is a way for people who are non-technical to interface with data using natural language. So what I mean by that is they should be able to ask Delphi questions about data, much like they would an analyst, and get back safe answers that they can go and then use for different purposes, whether it's like making a decision, making a prediction, making a slide, making a graph, whatever that might be, that they can then go on and go and do the thing that they wanted to do with the data when they first had the question.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. And I think it seems like it's perfect timing with the GPT models and ChatGPT really becoming popular and mainstream. Do you have any thoughts or perspective on that, and how is that the
Yeah.
next level that is going beyond SQL?
Yeah, so we have like a bit of a contrarian view to like some of the other companies that are trying to do a similar thing to us, in that we don't generate SQL using the large language models. We generate a semantic layer request, which is like an API request to the likes of the dbt semantic layer, LightDash, Metabase, Cube, Looker, those things which have a semantic layer and an API to call. So that's how we interact with them. And I think that's like a really good way to explain like why we think now is a great time for this, is that the LLMs, of course, GPT 3.5, GPT-4 coming out very recently, it's a great time to start using those models, but also it's a great time to start leveraging these semantic layers, which are now very popular, and even compared to 2 years ago, are have proliferated much more than before.
Okay, so you need the semantic layers in place for Delphi to work. You're not
Yeah,
going
so
you're
yeah,
not
we
going
use
directly to the database.
to today, yes, we need that to be in place. We are working with some partners to help customers who maybe don't have one set one up quickly. And in the future, we're also considering, could we help people do like a land and expand minimal semantic layer that we look after for them.
Okay, that's really cool. And obviously, GPT 3, 3.5, 4 now are obviously very capable. But then you have Google also doing something very interesting there with BART. How are you approaching this? Are you going to have to democratize this where folks who want to go down the GPT path, maybe for licensing reasons, would choose that? Or if when BART comes up and is available, you can choose that too as well? Or are you going
So
to build your own custom LLMs in-house?
I think at this stage, the resource and capital required to build an LLM in-house is so high that we wouldn't attempt to do that. Having said that, the fact that many other providers are coming out with an API to use is very good for us as well. So once GCP and AWS, like AWS has Hugging Face now, and GCP have their own models that they may have built with DeepMind, we definitely want to start exploring using those, maybe even like providing choice or even kind of automated selection based on performance, and making sure uptime is guaranteed by having multiple models to choose from. And there are open source providers starting to emerge because of how OpenAI started open but now is moving to becoming quite proprietary.
Pretty interesting. So I know we're going to get into the demo here, but for decision makers within organizations, who is this for? Is this for your everyday analyst who's used to reports, Power BI, Tableau, or Excel? Or are you thinking about this more from kind of your data engineers who are more technical, down deep in the weeds to make their life easy? Just maybe elaborate a little bit on who is the audience for
So
interface like this.
we definitely think the data team needs to be involved with the buying or trying process, because they're the ones who know, oh, we have a semantic layer. Like usually it's the data team that looks after the semantic layer, almost always. And they're the ones who are going to be able to provision an API key and things like that. So they need to be there. We actually think that they're probably the least likely people to use it. We think it's much more likely that there's, what we're aiming for is to enable their non-technical stakeholders to have access to data, because we think self-serve, it's been a bit of a dream in the last few years. There are people who've made good strides with tools, tools like Looker, LightDash, ThoughtSpot, Metabase. They've made good strides, but there's still this assumed level of skill that actually a lot of people in businesses and organizations don't have. That level of skill, which is probably the equivalent of being able to build a pivot table in Excel. That's actually beyond a big part of the population, and actually using something like Delphi, which is just asking a question, is not beyond anyone, really.
Yeah, that's very interesting to think about, because I was having a conversation too around this topic, and it's interesting how ChatGPT has gone mainstream. But what people don't realize is that GPT has been around for a while. GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3 before they went into 3.5, which then changed into the chat. So someone did make a good point that the chat experience was one of the biggest revolutions that has been enlightening for folks. Not necessarily the technology, because technically GPT has been around, but doing it in chat reveals something that people prefer to chat, right? We do it every single day. And it sounds like you're kind of taking that same approach.
Yeah, definitely.
To the enterprise. Maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we think that today those stakeholders are often asked to use Jira or something to generate a ticket for their data team. It's quite unnatural for them because they've probably forgotten how to log into Jira in the time since they last made a request. It's not a nice, they don't always know what to put in the ticket. So you end up having this back and forth, usually with the data team not being happy with the quality of the ticket or the content of the ticket. And then it's not a nice experience today. Then they get prioritized, backlogged into the workflow. If their work isn't to do with OKRs, typically it ends up being they'll end up waiting weeks if it gets done at all. So it's not a great experience. Whereas what stakeholders do usually to avoid that is just ping their analyst. They'll Slack their analyst or go on Teams and ping their analyst. And that's kind of disruptive to the analyst, and they still don't get a quick answer because fundamentally you're asking a human. The human might be at lunch, the human might be on vacation, and then you don't get your answer. And even when they do see the message, they may say, well, I need to prioritize this. Then they'll make the ticket, which is not a great experience for them either. And so the whole process is broken, in all honesty. I don't think that process works very well today.
It sounds like you have a really good solution for that. Cannot wait to jump in and see a good demo of that. So Michael, take it away.
Yeah, let me bring it up here. All right, so this is Delphi. Right now, Delphi is a Slack application that teams can just really easily install in their Slack workspace. In the future, we also aim to build integrations with Microsoft Teams, with email, and also a standalone platform.
So you essentially are meeting the community where they are, because folks are already in Slack, folks are already on Teams.
Yep.
Yeah, they
exactly.
Instead of pinging David or Michael to ask a question, they'll ping Delphi, right? That's the idea.
Awesome.
Exactly. And so with Delphi, the configuration is really simple. It only takes a few minutes. The data team, the head of data or whoever is setting this up, will just go in here and choose which semantic layer or BI tool they want to connect it to. So right now we support the DBT semantic layer, we support LightDash, and we support Metabase, but we have more BI tools and semantic layers coming very soon. I'm going to work with LightDash for now. And so this is what the user would see when they're configuring Delphi. Basically, they just need to enter some an API key that we can give them to connect to Delphi, and then add a few credentials for their LightDash instance. And that's really all it takes, right? So this can be done in a minute or two if you have the credentials on hand.
Awesome.
And so then how do you actually use Delphi? So the best way to use Delphi is to add it to a public channel. And so I'm going to add Delphi to this demo channel that I've set up here. We've already connected it to a data set based on the kind of popular DBT Jaffle Shop demo project. So we have some information about, actually you can see the catalog. So let me just show you. We have information about some metrics, including our average order amount, our expenses, our profit, our revenue, and a bunch of different dimensions that you can break those down by. And so I'm just going to ask some questions about the kinds of things that we might be selling. And so, you know, one thing someone might want to know if they're using Delphi, maybe it's an executive who wants to understand what happened to holiday sales in the previous year, to know, did we get a bump? Did things go down? So you can ask Delphi something like, what happened to sales around the holidays? You'll notice this is a very open-ended question, right? Mm-hmm. It's not asking like break down revenue by week. Like you're not giving it keywords or anything. You're just asking a question about real things in the real world. And so the first thing that Delphi does is we know we don't actually have to run a new query every single time, right? Oftentimes there's already a dashboard or there's already a saved query that someone has made for the question that you want an answer to. And it's just a matter of finding that thing. And so we have this feature called Semantic Search where Delphi can look across your BI tool, across this existing work, and pull up things that might be relevant to answering your question. So right here, it pulled up this monthly sales KPIs report that it thinks may answer my question. Let me pull that up so you can see. Again, we're using LightDash, so now it's taking the user right into LightDash and pulling this report. And so these are our monthly sales. You can kind of see in December where things were, but right, that's looking at the entire month. Maybe I want to be more granular. And so I'll go back to Delphi and say, no, that didn't quite answer it. Run something new.
Okay. And as you're going through that, did Delphi generate that report or did it find an existing report and surface that to you?
So that was something that an analyst had already built.
Okay.
Right? And so it's something that the data team has worked on, is validated. Mm-hmm. You know, Delphi and the user can be confident that this is something that, you know, is answering the question in a way that mm-hmm. has been done before, basically.
Okay.
And so I told Delphi to run a new query. And let me make this a little bigger so everyone can see it really easily. Trust is really important, right? The user needs to know what's going on. They need to know what Delphi is going to do so that they understand what Delphi is about to run and they can trust it. And so Delphi, like an analyst would, will explain back to you in natural language what it's about to run. And so here it said it's going to look at the revenue metric limited to the date range and basically in December 2022. Do you want me to proceed? I'm going to say, I want to see that a little more granular. And so I'm going to tell it to look weekly. And so you can have this back and forth like someone would with an analyst, like someone would with their data team, to clarify the question, make changes, and then run it from there.
Yeah, so you're having that back and forth to really fine tune what the query is before sending that off to the semantic layer.
Yep.
Okay.
It's meant to like characterize just as how an analyst would interact with a stakeholder today. You know, a stakeholder would come to the analyst, ask them a question. The analyst would then repeat the question back to them in their kind of data language that maps, you know, real world things to data things. And that's how they refine the question for the, you know, frame the question for the stakeholder and get to like a really good question and then a better answer.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And as this come true, this was just kind of got me thinking. It's always interesting when you have an analyst that you can ask a question and get a response. What are your thoughts about not just what to ask, but what should you ask? Because that's also a different domain. So, as a decision maker, maybe I'm asking about sales, but I really should be asking about revenue based on what the intelligence is seeing behind the scenes. Do you have any thought? Mm-hmm.
So there's an element by which, if the thing you ask for, like sales and revenue, for example, if they're sufficiently similar in meaning that we can just cope with that, just like a person would. And so if someone say, oh, can I have sales weekly? You could just, like what Delphi might say back to them is, we're going to pull the revenue metric weekly. And then the person can either accept it or say, actually, that's not what I meant.
Okay.
But yeah, that's definitely really important. One of the things that we think is really important about Delphi as well is that, we have the ability to say, sorry, that what you've asked doesn't exist. Like, we can't find anything in the semantic layer. So we're not going to be able to answer the question. We're not just going to guess and give you like a junk answer. We'll just say no. And in the future, we'll want to do things like show you questions that have been asked before and show you things from the metric layer, like almost like a catalog of items that you can ask about.
Yeah, that's interesting, because if you sit as an input layer and you have access to all the queries, you can then be an input to the dev team to say, we're getting a lot of questions about this domain, but we don't have that on the semantic layer.
Yes.
So maybe you should go incorporate that as part of your next dev cycle.
Yeah, it's been like you're actually the third person who's suggested like the metadata that we collect could help data teams like build new products that their stakeholders need.
Pretty powerful. And maybe you touched on this a little bit. How do you handle, I'm asking this with the perspective of ChatGPT and the large language models. We all know there is hallucination that happens every now and then when you get your responses. How do you deal and handle that from a data quality perspective so that I'm not getting some numbers that shouldn't be what I should be getting back? So talk about quality a little bit.
So one thing we think is already a step up is that we rely on the semantic layer. So typically when an analytics team has exposed things in their semantic layer, it's because that data is either, firstly, it exists, and secondly, it's considered safe for people to access. That otherwise they wouldn't have exposed it, or they at least shouldn't have exposed it. And that already is a level of safety and a level of quality that I think if you were to do text to SQL, you don't know what table that system might just go and choose, and it might be an experimental table. That won't happen with a semantic layer. So that's already good. We also think like there is the opportunity as well. So for stakeholders to like challenge things, like, so let's say like here where Delphi's given the answer by week, let's say there was maybe a week's number where the stakeholder didn't agree that was the right number. They could click on that and say, I think this looks wrong, even though the query looks right. And then that becomes a data quality issue that can be sent on to the data team to handle.
That's pretty awesome. And then how do you handle repeated questions? So as a decision maker, analyst, I always ask this question. And I find this too with the ChatGPT experience, where I want to come back and get the same questions reprocessed, like opening the same dashboard I used to open. How do you handle that without me retyping this query every now and then?
So one of the things that we really want to do, we haven't got this yet, but we want to do something called question similarity. So when someone asks a question, if we have a similar question, either from like a text similarity or from a semantic similarity point of view, we want to start suggesting the questions that have already been asked. And we want to include things like social cues, like, someone else from your team, like let's say you're in marketing, there's someone else from marketing asked this question and they got a validated answer. And do you want to use that? And, there's probably a high probability in that case that it's a good answer for the same question. And so yeah, we want to reuse the answers we've already been given. It just helps with consistency, saves time as well. And yeah, that's definitely the way we want to think about answering similar or similar questions or the same question again.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And thanks for that. Just to double click again on the privacy and the governance piece, there is the large language model incorporating in here, which is the GPT model. How are you ensuring that the questions that is being posed into this doesn't potentially expose sensitive proprietary governed enterprise data being sent over to the chat GPT or the GPT 3.5 language models?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's very important. It's something we've talked about a lot with some of our early users who are sensitive about this. And so you'll notice here when I actually ran the query, right, Delphi gave me this plain English summary of during the holiday season, the weekly revenue was as follows. And, there was an increase during the week of December 26th. And so that kind of plain English summary, if you go back to the options that we were showing you here in the setup, right, people can choose whether to enable that or to disable it. And the reason we allow that is because most of what Delphi is doing is just sending metadata to OpenAI or to the large language model providers, right? We're not sending your actual data. We're not sending the data that's returned from your data warehouse, except for that one very specific purpose of creating that plain English summary. And so that's something you can choose to turn off or not, depending on your sensitivity. But we've also been exploring ways of, in the future, letting companies self-host models and stuff like that to keep everything internal if they want to.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And then can you talk about languages? Obviously, there's support for English. Je parle un peu de français. I speak a little bit of French. What are your thoughts around support for more languages beyond English?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that if you asked a question in English, Spanish, French, whatever other language you want, this is all powered by GPT-4, and GPT-4 understands a bunch of those languages. And so that should actually work out of the box. But it's something that we definitely want to, keep an eye on and continue improving, right? Because even already we have users from a bunch of different countries across the globe. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting point.
That's awesome. And then switching gears here a little bit to talk about access and go-to-market. I'm guessing today you are currently available for everyone to use. Is that correct? Or is it still in beta?
Yeah, so we're in kind of an alpha program right now. And so we have a wait list on our website at DelphiHQ.com that folks can sign up for. And, depending on where you are with your data stack, what tools you use and your use case, we're taking people off that wait list kind of as we can handle them. But we like I mentioned at the beginning, we're working on integrations with more BI tools and semantic layers right now. And so we're hoping to be able to take even more people off that wait list very soon.
Okay. And then two things. Can you talk a little bit about the pricing in terms of how are you monetizing this? Is it in the number of questions you ask? How complex your semantic layer is? How do you approach monetization? I'm guessing it's not free.
No, it will be SaaS. The pricing, like, we haven't locked down exact pricing yet, but we know the method that we'll want to price. And
okay,
so if you think that we'll deliver a consumption-based model of this is, let's say you pay for our startup tier, you'll get X number of queries per month. Go for our growth tier, you get more and a cheaper rate, and enterprise is then negotiated even further. That's probably the way we'll price it. As we release more and more features as well, chances are some of those may not be on the startup plan, maybe on the growth or enterprise plans as well. That's the way we were thinking. Very common, I guess, like SaaS startup pricing.
Okay, and consumption based, you said, in terms of number of queries.
Tiered consumption base, yeah.
Okay, that's pretty awesome.
We definitely don't want to restrict people on number of people who have access to it. We want people to just give access to their whole organization once they're ready to do that. But yes, we won't be pricing on seats.
Okay, and there is no limit to the number of Slack channels you can add the robot.
No.
I call it a robot, but you can add Delphi too.
No, right? No limit.
Okay, and then maybe we step back a little bit and talk about big vision perspectives here, David and Michael. What are your thoughts? What do you see as the biggest disruption that's going to happen, or is already happening for NLP and LLMs that folks are not thinking about right now? They should be thinking about for decision makers.
Really interesting question. I might let Michael answer that while I think of my answer.
Yeah, And maybe to clarify a little bit, where is this all going? Because everyone today is excited about ChatGPT, and it seems like this is blindsiding a lot of product developers, right? And now people are trying to respond to all of this. And personally, I'm not even sure if the average analyst has caught up to what this means for them. But we're still at the beginning. This is still the nascent stage, at least in my opinion. So kind of curious, where is this all going in the next year or 2 or 3 or 5 years once this matures and really takes hold within organizations?
Yeah, so my thought is that, right, these large language models, this artificial intelligence is really about to democratize access to data within a company. And so part of that is things like what we're trying to do at Delphi, right, where business stakeholders can get easier access to the data that's in their data warehouse or their semantic layer than they've ever had before. But there's also all these different pieces, places where data and knowledge lives within an organization. And so I've seen teams that are building applications powered by AI for, searching Google Drive and your emails and stuff like that to just democratize that knowledge and make it much easier to find. And so that's what I'm really excited about.
That's pretty powerful. Yeah, I think we're still at the very beginning of this with bringing natural language. We all speak, language is what we use to communicate, and really going beyond just the SQLs of the world, structured query language, to more the language everyday people use. I think is a very powerful space to be in. So fascinating product. How can folks get started? We're going to leave links to all of this in the description below. Any recommendations, any call outs, Slack channels you have, LinkedIn pages that the folks can go to check you out?
Yeah, so we're both on LinkedIn, so definitely get in touch that way. You can go to DelphiHQ.com and join the waitlist. We are very available on DBT, Locally Optimistic, and LightDash Slacks. So yeah, we're pretty accessible if you wanna try us out.
That's awesome. I'm going to leave links to all of this in the description below. Well, David, Michael, this is a very fascinating space. I think you guys are doing something pretty interesting here. For folks that want to check it out, do reach out to David and they can go deeper into all of this. I really appreciate it. And thanks for coming on board the Demo Hub.
Thanks so much for having us.